Hey, real quick, if you want to see this episode in podcast form, there is a link in the description. And also on the other side, if you're listening to this in podcast form and want to see the video version, the YouTube link will be in the description for you. Also, my audio wasn't great in this. Unfortunately, I think my gain was turned up too high. So I tried fixing my audio, but overall, thankfully, Yochai does most of the talking. So it's not too bad. Anyway, on with the show. Welcome. Today I'm joined by a very special guest. You may know him as the creator of Cairn 2E, Brad Care's victim of shenanigans on the podcast Between Two Cairns, and the creator of Beyond The Pale, Yochai Gal. Welcome, Yochai.
Brad Kerr's victim. I wonder if Brad sees me, just thinks to himself like, how am I going to screw with Yochai today? I don't actually think he does. I think he does it completely off the cuff to just even further make me.
I think he might not,
incensed.
and then you react, and then he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I got,
That is,
the bait's been taken. I'll move forward with it."
it's really true. And I'm like, people always ask us if it's like an act. It's not an act. It's 100% not an act.
I think that's why it's so funny, is because it's very clear it's not. Yeah, it feels like that's how you guys talk, even off camera.
It is. I mean, on like Discord, I don't think there's a lot of humor like through that, but when we're in real life together, it's definitely similar to that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I noticed that with the panel. Was it at GaryCon that you guys did?
Yeah. I thought we were similar. Yeah. 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 He's good. Well, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the big thing I want to talk about with you today is Beyond the Pale, which I reviewed, I think, probably 2 months ago now. It's been a bit.
Yep.
But I enjoy it so much. But I thought before we get too into the weeds, since you're the one who made it, do you want to sort of explain a little bit about what Beyond the Pale is for anybody who might not be aware?
Yeah. So Beyond the Pale is an adventure module. It's also a setting, but it's an adventure with dungeons and such. For the Cairn role-playing game, specifically Cairn First Edition, which was what I was playing when I wrote it. Now almost 3 years ago, it was published last December, but oh no, sorry, not last December, the December before that. But it's a module. It took me about 2 years to write, so I started writing in like 2022, I want to say. I guess the like unique thing about this module is that it's set in a very Jewish themed setting, very mythologically and culturally Jewish, which for those who aren't Jews or who aren't really familiar, there was a place in what is now Poland, Ukraine, and some other parts called the Pale of Settlement that the Russians had set up to force the Jews to live in. This place was a major cultural heart for modern European Jewry that lasted basically until the Russian Revolution. And I'm not, to be clear, it wasn't like, yes, it was the heart of Jewry, but it was like a really hard place to live, and there was many restrictions that the Jews were put under, etc. But out of that came this kind of incredible cultural motif, like this. A lot of things we see today that came out of either the Yiddish language or out of some Jewish religious movements or out of certain Jewish cultural customs and artistic movements came out of the Pale of Settlement. And I thought it would be cool to set an adventure in a sort of alternate quasi-real version of that place infused with Jewish cultural and religious mythology. So you'll see stuff in there that is both Eastern European Jewish as well as North African, Sephardic, Middle Eastern. There's a lot of influences that went into it, all of which came from 2 years of extremely intense research on my part. I also added some of my own stuff, which as a Jew means it's also now part of the canon of Jewish mythology. So I can happily say it's 100% Jewish mythology, and only a couple things I invented. The remainder were things I just read in folktales, in biblical texts, in just general stories I had heard growing up, also in historical texts. There's, stuff that is found in the historical record that, of course, is, not real. There's stories about vampires and such, but were just really cool. So I inserted those as well. And it's for me, it's my greatest a personal achievement. Like, I really am proud of it, and it took its emotional toll. I mean, it was a book that I dedicated to folks who were lost during both the Holocaust and the Soviet liquidation of Jews. And it's also the place that my family, or at least a large portion of my family, were from. That is now just sort of a black hole of historical record in my own bloodline. So to me, it was extremely personal, but also very fun. And I got to run it a few times and really loved the experience of writing it. So that's all a bunch of words to say it's an adventure module in the old school style, written for anyone, but set in a very Jewish context, which, despite America being a very culturally acceptable place for Jews, I said we have a lot of influence in media and such. I don't think a lot of this stuff made its way into the general milieu of American and Western folk mythology.
No,
and so
not
I just
at all.
wanted to bring that.
It was
I mean, there's some little things that people
Yeah.
probably have seen, but most of it's like watching Brad, for example, read early versions and saying like, why is there a foreskin that's been dried and kept under a bed, and I'll say, well, aha, well, I'll tell you why, you know.
Well, that was one of the things I found really interesting was that. Okay, so weirdly, it felt so fresh and different. I hadn't seen anything like it. But at the same time, after reading it and talking to you a bit on Discord like a few weeks ago, I started seeing a lot more stuff around. Like, one of the things I mentioned to you was, like, Sephiroth from, like, Final Fantasy VII, where his name comes from something, where
Yes.
there's all these things where it's like, wait, so there's
Yeah.
all this stuff that's kind of, like,
The Japanese
taken out of
love to rip
context?
off Kabbalah. That's
Yeah.
what that was. But yes, continue.
Oh yeah, no, that's mostly what I want to say. Where it's just like there's all these things where I started seeing more Jewish mythology
Yeah.
around, but it seemed like it's so severed from its origins, or it's not really.
Indeed.
I'm not gonna say it's hidden, but it doesn't necessarily.
It's-
When something like Greek
yeah.
mythology, it's Greek mythology. Like it's. I find overall it's pretty obvious, maybe because it's just so deeply embedded in Western culture. But
It is. I mean, it's interesting that you bring up Greek mythology because the Romans obviously stole all of it.
Yeah,
And-
exactly.
and so it has its I mean, Greece is the foundation of Western cultural civilization for a lot of for most folk. I think that's generally seen as the place where we get all of our base Western ideas. And Jews have always been around and are generally a fly on the wall in Western European societies, and that produces a very specific kind of cultural attitude that has obviously changed over the years, but we've carried our stories, which are usually quite humorous. They're not like, I mean, yeah, we have morality tales, but there's just a lot of humor in Jewish storytelling, and I wanted to kind of pull from that. I don't know how obvious it was, but there were a number of folktales that I read that I just thought were hilarious, and so I took ideas from those to insert into the module. Like, there's one point where there's a side quest that you can go on to find out who killed the mayor's bird, and that's entirely based off of a real folktale in which this mayor was this spoiler alert for the module. The bird is dead because it ate a bunch of counterfeit coins. And the reason it did that is because it saw the mayor chewing on coins to make sure that they were
real.
the real, right. And so it thought they were food, and that's legitimately a folktale. And a lot of the main quest and side quests directly came out of folktales, because I either thought they were funny or interesting, or maybe would lead to some good kind of old school play. And there's more to it than that, but yeah, you're right. It's not, Americans think of Jews in a very specific way, and I did want to kind of address that. Like, I remember watching this TV show, some terrible sci-fi show. I don't remember what it was. It's not like X-Files is a good show, but is also has also done this sort of thing. But this show in particular, which I still can't remember the name of it, had a guy summoning a demon, and he was just like holding a Kabbalistic text, like literally just a Jewish mystical text, and that's the book of demon summoning. So like
Yeah.
that kind of I don't want to say appropriation. I mean, it is what it is, but that's not the problem. The problem is it's misappropriation. It's basically saying, hey, this thing's exotic. It'll make a great prop, and that's how you end up with things like, Neon Genesis and Evangelion using the Sephirot, which, for those who don't know, is a Kabbalistic concept for becoming one with God. They take these images and iconography and just sort of insert them in places that don't really make any sense. And so I just wanted to like use it in context and in a way that was fun and not entirely mystifying for Gentiles and Jews alike.
Well,
And I'm not saying I accomplished that. I'm just saying I tried.
no, I think you absolutely did because I'm not Jewish and most of my table wasn't, but one of my friends who was playing was Jewish, and it was really fun that for the rest of us, it was like basically just folklore or fantasy or just something very like just different than we hadn't seen. But for my Jewish friend, he was just like, oh my god, wait, I know what this is, and he was sort of like letting us know certain things because he also has like a passing interest at least in Jewish mythology. So after the game was over and I was explaining different things, sort of spoiling stuff that they didn't see or whatever, and he was like, oh yeah, like that's from this book and I know about this thing. It was really fun seeing how much joy he got from that, whereas we had a similar joy but it was more just from the fun of the game, but there was like a deeper level for him that he found really rewarding playing through it.
That's very cool. I mean, I did write it for anyone. Like I think some Gentiles have reached out to me and said like, oh, am I allowed to play this? I'm like, yeah, you're supposed to play it. Like that. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. It's like to quote Zedek Shu, who's like one of my all-time favorite creators in the indie OSR scene. Like it's okay that this isn't for you. Just recognize your place in it, but also like it's good to be uncomfortable and to explore these worlds that the people who are of those worlds are kind of creating so that you can explore them. Like I if I wanted only Jews to play this, I would have done it very differently, but I actually explicitly wanted the PCs to not be Jews in the games that I ran. Like I'm not saying that's what you have to do, but what I played, all of my players were, without exception, were not Jewish.
Yeah.
And I ran it. I did 2 playtests of it, and none of the PCs, none of the players were ever identifiably Jewish. And that was for me very exciting because I got to see them scratch their heads a lot. And it's fun to see things. It's sort of like there's this book. I have lost. Oh, it's a Neil Stephenson book. I've lost the name of it right now. It's a funny name. Anyways, in this book, it's about a temple of monks who are like kind of philosophers, and in the book, there's all these concepts that in our world I'm familiar with, but the framing of these concepts and the names are unique to the book's setting. So until they're fully explained, you don't realize, oh, they're just talking about Occam's razor here. They just are calling it something else and using a different frame. But it actually gave me an insight into my own sort of assumptions around philosophy, because I was very used to a certain way of learning it and conceptualizing it. But this book, which again, Anathema, that's what it's called. It's Anathema. It did a really good job of making me see my own beliefs from a different angle. And that's kind of what I wanted to do here, is have folks look at traditional fantasy from a different angle. Like, okay, yeah, there's monsters and you need to get rid of them in some cases, but why are they monsters? How did they become a monster? What even is a monster? And I just wanted to kind of give people a new path to doing that. And I'm not saying I succeeded, but I was at least my goal.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and there was a huge diverse amount of monsters in it too. That to the point where what's funny, the game I originally pitched it as 3 sessions to my friends. It ended up being 6 because even I think we played for either 3 or 4 hours per session. It was so open that like they kind of could just do whatever they want, and there were so many different things they could interact. You mentioned some of the monsters you came up with yourself, but were all the other ones from Jewish mythology, or
everything is from either Ashkenazic, which is like European, specifically Eastern European, or Middle Eastern. Like I'm Israeli, and some of the conceits in the module were rooted in more what I would call biblical myths. Like there's a there's a half lion, half stag kind of god creature, Keresh Tigres, which is a real Babylonian Jewish myth of this. I mean, literally, its description comes right out of the original myth, which is that its roar could abort babies and cause men's teeth to break. You know, that is just directly rooted in that mythology. And then the main big bad, which is the Aluka, that's actually an Arabic word, or it's rooted in an Arabic word. It means a leech or a horse leech. That's another, I mean, likely rooted in non-Jewish mythology, but was absolutely adopted by Jews. Sometimes used to describe vampires, although there are multiple Jewish vampires in this book. So I decided to make her more of the demonic version of the Aluka myth, which is, again, appeared many times. She's more like a version of Pestilence than anything else. And I also wanted to address the way demons in general are perceived in Western, specifically Christian mythology. Demons are this very specific satanic kind of thing. That is not the case in Jewish mythology. Even the word demon is kind of an incorrect word. It's often translated from the word for ghost, which is closer to the word for spirit. And I wanted demons to have personalities like they do in the folktales. I mean, even in not just the folktales, but in religious texts, demons go to temple. They are not always bad. They sometimes help people. Same thing with witches. Like, it's not quite as simplistic as it is perceived in modern, like, popular culture for Catholic and Christian.
So demon's not like the best translation, really, then, because
it's not, but it's very common.
Very common,
it's really common. So, like, for instance, like, there is this story called The Fool and the Forest Demon, which is one of my all-time favorite short stories, and it has been translated as demon for at least since the 1960s, if not before. It's by a guy called Der Nister, which that's just a pen name for the author. But The Fool and the Forest Demon later was translated as The Fool and the Forest Spirit, and it gives you. It's amazing to me. The text is roughly the same, but I've read both versions. The title completely changes your perception of this quote unquote demon in the folktale. And there's other folktales too, where demons trick travelers or help travelers or whatever, or run away from the wives of men that they're trying to, screw over. And these folks aren't really demons in the sense that we consider. They're more somewhere between a traditional genie, which that's a whole kind of worms, but they're closer to like mythological spirits who have their own kind of society and families and morality. And I just wanted to play with that because I really enjoy the Jewish interpretation of demons. Same thing with vampires. There's a monster / NPC called an Estrie that's based on the Jewish French tradition. Essentially, it's a woman who turns into an owl and sucks your hair with her, sucks your blood with her hair. That's actually from a legit newspaper clipping that I found about a woman complaining that she'd been attacked by an Estrie. There's also another. I found another in my. I'm fortunate enough to live 20 minutes from the Yiddish Book Center, which is in Amherst, Massachusetts. Which anyone who's in the area, I strongly recommend go there. It's an incredible place. I did have a breakdown going there the first time because it was a very emotional experience for me. But it's not like a Holocaust museum. It's nothing like that. But that place, they have some great resources, some digital resources, and you can also, by the way, buy full books in Yiddish for like $3 that are like 80 years old. It's kind of insane. But the translated works, I did find this hilarious article about a judgment in court where this guy took the demons who live in his basement to court, and the judge had to make a ruling. Well, it's the Beit Din. It's like a Jewish court, but he had to make a ruling about like, well, technically, like, I think it was the husband had slept with this demon who then had kids, and like, do the kids have rights to his house after he passes away? And that it was between the new owners of his house, of this guy's who's now dead's house, and his half demon children who lived in the basement. And the judge had to order them to return to the rivers that they came from, and they listened because they respect the Jewish religious courts. Stuff like that I just like, oh, I want to insert.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic fodder for anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, it took I read basically exclusively Jewish related literature, especially folktales, for like 2 straight years. That's all I read. And I have this whole shelf over here that's just like folktale. I even have a book called The Jewish Story Finder that is just references to other books. That's all it is.
Oh, wow.
It's like you open it up and you're like, okay, if I'm looking for what's that story about this and that, oh, it appears in these stories and I can find them in these books because that there's just so many of these stories. And that's only what's available in English, which is like less than 2% of what's been translated from Yiddish, for example.
Oh, wow.
A lot of this stuff comes from other languages too, but there's just this massive body of work that is really fun and eminently gameable, in my opinion. There's just a lot of gameable situations. You know, there's like battles between wizards and rabbis that they've like are firing like projections of animals at each other, and there's like werewolves that infect rabbis who then have to hide it, and there's all these stories that ended up in here. Not all of the ones I wanted, but quite a bit of that just ended up here as things that the players can engage with.
Well, that actually does lead me to one question I had for you was, were there like any like darlings you had to kill that come to your mind that you really wish you could have kept in there? Like, is there anything like that, like, not necessarily the one you think about the most, but if there any, like, I'm really curious, because like there was already so much, because it was like about 100 pages or so, I believe, and
yes,
like it's so dense. You don't have too much writing, like it's like you have it very like I'm not gonna say utilitarian, but you don't overstay the welcome with a lot of the writing of stat blocks and different characters and that sort of thing. So it feels like there's less than there is when you're reading through it, and then when you actually go through it, it's like, oh, there's actually quite a bit here.
Yeah, there's a lot that I wanted to include. Some of it takes a lot to explain, but I would say the biggest one that I really wanted to do more with are like what is commonly referred to as biblically accurate angels, which isn't like it's sort of a misnomer, but I'll read you just a section here. I have this is from my own translation of gosh, what is that? Was it Isaiah? No, I can't remember where. I have the translation written down, but not my reference. But this is my own translation of the description of angels as they were originally described. Okay, they had the figures of human beings. However, each had 4 faces, and each of them had 4 wings, the legs of which were fused into a single rigid leg, and the feet of which were like a single calf's hoof, and their sparkle was like the luster of burnished bronze. They had human hands below their wings. The 4 of them had their faces and their wings on their 4 sides. Each one's wings touched those of the other. They did not turn when they moved. Each could move in the direction of any of its faces. Each of them had a human face at the front. Each of them had the face of a lion on the right. Each of the 4, there's 4 I guess in this situation, had the face of an ox on the left and an eagle at the back. Such were their faces. As for their wings, they were separated. Above, each had 2 touching those of the others, while the other 2 covered its body. And each could move in the direction of any of its faces. They went wherever their spirit impelled them to go without turning when they moved. Specifically, the moving without looking thing really creeps me out. And you can Google like biblically accurate angels to get artist renditions of what angels, as opposed to like little cherubs that you see today.
Yeah, it's become a bit of a meme in the last few years as well, where you look at it.
Yeah. But if you actually read it, it's quite chilling.
Yeah.
And it's I wanted to do more of that. I did have a little bit of that in one of the dungeons. But so that was one thing that I wanted to do more of those. I kind of quote unquote made up for it in the supplement. At the very end, there's a section about how you find this book
very cool
gives
book.
You access to angels. Yeah, so I kind of made that I actually wrote like three months after I finished, and I'm glad because it let me put in stuff I wanted. The other thing that I would have wanted to put in are these things called Kapel-Yushnikals. Kapel-Yushnikals, yeah. Which are these little like hobgoblin dudes with red hats who like love milk, steal horses, cause lots of problems, but are like generally kind of fun. I wanted to put more of them in because that's a classic like little Eastern European Jewish conceit. Are these Kapel-Yushnikals? They're called that because they wear red hats. Kapel,
yeah,
hat.
That sounds a bit like the is it Nissen or Nisser? One of the Vaesen.
Yeah,
it
like
sounds similar to that.
Right, like those guys are so Nissen are more like furballs. If I'm going by what the Hilda show. So I only know of them because of that show. I don't know
Oh,
them
right. Yeah, they're in
historically.
that.
Yeah, they're little furballs that like live in an empty space. So I guess they're similar. Although those are more like shret was a hard word to say. Shretelich. There it is. I don't speak. Yiddish is not. I speak Hebrew, not Yiddish, but I can read Yiddish, so I can pronounce it. But the Shretelichs are these like troublemaker little tiny humans. They're the ones who like help the shoemaker make his shoes. That
Oh,
kind
okay,
of
yeah.
story.
Yeah, because I think the Nissan, at least, like, all I know is from the actual, like, Vaesen or Vossen RPG from Free League. I think they're, like, farmyard spirits, basically, where, like, you kind of want to do things for them, like, leave out, like, a bowl of milk or something, where they might, like,
that is similar.
Take your horse away, or, start fucking with the farm.
There's many of these. Yeah, another one I've heard is the Schrack. No, how do you say it? This is German. It's like it's Schrat, like scrat, but with a in the middle. So I think it said those are also these like Germanic, little polar bear thingies that bug farm people. But so I wanted to do more of those. There's a lot of little tiny things like I wanted to include more stuff with the Matsikim, which are the bird-like, quote-unquote, demons that lived there prior to the Jews living there. I originally had written this with a more Israel-Palestine kind of thing going on because I had this sort of like mishmash of both like Pale of Settlement plus like modern Israel I was going for, but it didn't really work, so I kind of peeled back. Originally it was called The Starving Coast was the name of this region initially, and I had wanted to do more that was, I guess you'd call it like relevant to today's situation, but I don't know. In the end, that didn't really work as well, so I went back to doing it this way. I'm sure I can think of other things, but that's what I think off the top of my head. There's just little weird stuff like how there's these creatures called Yibum that jump bodies between depths, and I sort of ended up doing that with the Gilgul, which is this creature that lives in a tree. This is the spirit of a man who's attached himself to a tree after he died. And so I wanted to do a little like there's so many, like every little thing I wrote in there has like a lot more depth in the record. Like I'm doing as superficial a job as I can. Like I'm not gonna like even the word Gilgul really just means like cycle, like it's like the cycle of reincarnation that sometimes appears in more mystical Jewish thought. But it's also been used to specifically describe a creature that is kind of trapped between two worlds. And the Gilgul in particular is this guy who died while hunting, and his body got attached to a wolf, and then the wolf died, and so it got attached to a tree, and now he's in a tree. And that story is actually directly from a folktale I read in which this Gilgul gets stuck in a tree, and the woodcutter's like trying to negotiate with him because he doesn't want him to cut the tree down.
That side quest was the most divisive for my group, funnily enough, because one person really wanted to go back to them and start figuring things out, because they did what the Gilgul wanted, which I'll try to avoid spoilers where I can, but then they wanted to go check on them, but the other two were like, fuck that guy, we have so many other things to do right now, we don't have time to go check on like every little freak that we find coming across there. I'm sure we did the job that he needed done, I'm sure he's okay, because one of them, I think it was funny, the one who really wanted to go back, I think saw them as like a font of knowledge, but he's really just a guy, so I was like, we only have so much time. This is already when I thought I was gonna be able to make it in 3 sessions, so I was kind of like, maybe we should go all the way back over there just for me to not be very helpful to you guys.
I would say the only thing I would say about that is that the point of the folktales, as the stories as they're called in the book, is to direct the PCs to more evidence as to what's really going on.
Yes.
Like that one connects directly to what's happening in an important dungeon. So
which is why the other two players didn't care, because they're like, listen, this led us to so much other stuff. Like that's not really like a thing we need to worry about anymore. Because they did what the Gilgul wanted, so they were like, I think we're done.
That's fine.
Which is great. It was greater party arguments about what they should do next.
They understood. Like they understood who he was though in the end. Right?
Yes,
They put
yeah,
together.
yeah.
Okay,
They
that's
knew
kind of
very early on. Like, oh,
yeah.
yeah. On that as well. One thing I found interesting was that you did get a sensitivity reader.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you are Jewish, but I do know that like Jewish mythology, because Jews are all across the world, that like that's a lot.
Indeed.
While it's still your culture, it is also a lot of different cultures as well.
Well,
That are
I wasn't raised religious, so I mean, my parents are commie atheist kibbutzniks. They're not like my father told me stories, and I heard stories from my grandmother, but you know, they're very socialist realists, is what that kind of, you know, that there was a there is a fracture in a lot of Jewish society, and most Jews I know are not religious. Yossi, who was the sensitivity reader, he's a friend of mine, RPG guy, also a great editor, by the way. He has been raised in and still currently lives in an ultra Orthodox community. And he points things out that I would know after the fact, but like not pay attention to. So, for instance, we were going through different art because all the artists that I hired were Jews as well, obviously. We were going through the different art pieces for various things, and I was sort of like, it was kind of after the Kickstarter, I was kind of like done with it. It was for the book plate, and I was not paying as much attention. And one of the artists who isn't religious at all had, without really thinking, had written the name of God, which you're not supposed to ever write down, right? Because if you do, you then have to go put it into a geniza, which is this kind of it's kind of like a quote unquote temporary coffin for religious texts that, or any text that contains the name of God. There's actually a geniza in one of the dungeons in the module. But anyhow, I hadn't noticed that this artist had created this image with the name of God in there. So I think it was Yossi who actually noticed. It was like, you should not, like, I just saw that piece. No, it needs to be edited. Because what would happen if a Jewish person who was from this background or who was a religious person purchased Beyond the Pale, they literally couldn't ever destroy it. They would have to bury it in a Geneva, which is give it to a rabbi. That's because anytime that, so God has a bunch of names, and there's a bunch of ways of referring to God when you're talking. Like in theory, you'd say things like Elohim or something, right? You'd never say Yahweh, which I'm comfortable saying. But if you write it down, it has to be treated differently. Literally, the books have to be put in a place where they can decay, for the right amount of time before being destroyed, which can be centuries. We're finding Genizas that hold books that are 1,000 years old because they were putting scrolls in there that had God's name on them, and they didn't want them to just be buried like any other book. Anyhow, wow. So that's just an example. So that was like a last minute thing where I was just like, oh, the book plate looks great, move on, and I just didn't think, oh yeah, we probably should remove God's name from the book plate. Yeah. Otherwise, certain people will have problems, And that's the value of having a sensitivity reader. It doesn't matter that I'm a Jew. Mm-hmm. I feel perfectly comfortable doing and saying things on behalf of my own background, but I'm not religious. I mean, I'm not. I studied a lot of stuff in order to make this work, but there's things that didn't make sense, like things about how men and women are treated in these kinds of places that either I had to look up or I had to have someone who knows this stuff who would say, no, that would never be how it is. And I'm sure there is little things, like I'm not going to put everything on Yossi, but there's things I decided I was okay with, like, for example, there is a non-Jewish tavern owner because in the Pale Settlement, Jews were not allowed to make their own alcohol. Mm-hmm. And there is an interesting history behind like tavern owners who were Jews and whether or not they could make alcohol depended on where they lived.
But they're allowed to drink it.
It was legal for them to... They can drink it. They can't. There's a lot of jobs we weren't allowed to have, and depending where you were and what time period it was, Jews were not allowed to produce and sell alcohol.
Oh, so this was a rule of the law. This is not a religious law?
No, this is a Russian.
Russian Empire. Oh, yeah. Okay. I did not realize from the text because like I have overall a lot of ignorance about Jewish culture, so that was the thing where I was like, oh, I didn't know this was a thing because I never heard of it. But that makes more sense that maybe barring Jews
explicit.
From... Yeah.
Well, you'll note that the only two, or I should say 3 Gentiles in the entire thing are involved in the sale of alcohol.
Yeah.
Which is there's Frank,
Yeah.
who's not Jewish. And then there are the two tavern owners who, and this is actually this is off the air. I had mentioned that there was one typo I've been like dying to fix, and it's I used the wrong suffix on the Yiddish word for a female tavern owner. I wrote Ella the Shanker. Shanker is the male. It should be Shankerin for the. I just didn't notice it, and it's because I was swapping out Hebrew and Yiddish depending on how I like what my gut told me.
I got to change my review now. It's
yeah, it's all
video's going down.
Unusable.
Yeah.
But so Ella and Carl own this tavern, or the tavern house as they call it, and Frank sells alcohol. There's one page that all the Gentiles are on.
Yeah,
and they are all involved in that, and it's not because there's no prohibition from Jews selling alcohol. The prohibition is on Jews selling it under the Russian law at the time, which was, Jews were required to identify themselves wherever they went. They basically could just be killed for any reason. Yeah. There were, of course, multiple pogroms, which is when people just decided to kill Jews for no reason, and that happened again and again and again. So there's a lot of limitations, but it's hard to kind of make this stuff explicit because I only, the actual adventure summary and historical record take up one spread. I'm not going to make people
read a history
book,
a
ton. Yeah,
but I will say it did make me do research for it, because while I was reading it, there was stuff where I would try and find different articles I could find to explain certain things, because there's enough there that there's enough explained. But because I had a Jewish player at the table, I wanted to really make sure that like I didn't put my foot in my mouth at any point. So I was trying to make sure I had a good coverage of things, which he was chill regardless of that sort of stuff. But it was also very fascinating learning so much, because as much as like I'm a very big history fan, and I knew about the Jewish treatment in the Russian Empire, but I didn't know specifically about the Pale of settlement, where like Ukraine and Poland and all that is. So that was like pretty new to me. With that
it's also not the first Pale settlement either. As folks will possibly remind you, there was also an Irish Pale, which was set up by the British. And the word pale, by the way, just for the Latin palus, which means a stake. Like palo in Spanish is the same word. It's like a stake in the ground indicating the border of the area. So there have been two pales, one Pale of settlement and one is the Irish Pale. Both terrible, by the way.
Yep.
Although I do have a book here on UK Jewish stories from the UK, and there is a great one about the Irish Pale, in which this Jew from one part of Ireland that wasn't dominated by the British would come in and do trades with the British on the British side, and he was doing these trades for years and years and years, and the guy who was in charge of like checking his goods was like totally sure that this Jewish guy was screwing him somehow, or was smuggling something. And every time this guy would show up, he'd bring all his donkeys forward, and the English officer would go and like check each like item in inventory looking for contraband, but could never find it. And each time he would have to say, okay, you and your donkeys can go on. And eventually this merchant retired. Oh no, I should say eventually the British guy was recalled back to England, and he saw the Jewish guy. He goes, look, I don't even care. I know that you've been sneaking stuff in all these years. I just want to know what it is. Can you tell me? What have you been smuggling? And the Jewish guy said, isn't it obvious? Donkeys. And I remember that was a great story. But it's those nice little connections.
That's really funny. That's very good.
Yeah, well, just had to insert one. Sorry, I didn't mean to. They're all up here, okay, and they don't.
No, this is what this is for. I just want. This is just for a chat. This is not a formal interview or anything like that. No, but actually, speaking of that, does actually lead me. Are there any other periods in Jewish history that sort of interest you for like as future stories to tell? Like, there's like the Jewish-Roman Wars. I know there's like the golden age of Judaism, like under the Muslims in Spain. Like, there's a billion different periods and stories to be told. Is there anything that like that has like inspired you at all?
Yeah, I would say so. One area that I really like is like the Jews who lived in the Balkan region. There's a group of Jews who were originally Muslim, I think, and then converted when they were conquered. It comes up there's a book called Gentlemen of the Road. It was originally called Jews with Swords. It's by Michael Chabon.
That actually sounds really familiar.
It's I have mixed feelings on it, but I really enjoyed it. But I find there's not a lot of history where the Jewish people conquer another group and then convert them. That doesn't usually happen.
Hmm.
Usually there's wars, but there's not actual conversions. In this case, they were actually converted, and then there was this sort of like, you know, quasi historical empire that we're still not sure even existed.
Hmm.
So that kind of interests me. And then Jews in China. That's pretty interesting. After the Holocaust, in particular, there was a lot of Jews that went to China. In fact, there are some very famous Jews who were raised in like Shanghai and then later moved and spoke Yiddish there. So I kind of like that mishmash, and I also enjoy the Jews on the Silk Road traveling to the east. Going through Iran, Jews in Persia. I grew up on the 1001 Nights stories. My father told them to me from a very young child, and I later read multiple translations of them. The Hadaway one is the best one, by the way, or at least my favorite. By the way, a bunch of the stories that are actually in 1001 Arabian Nights are not in 1001 Arabian Nights that we have in English. They were inserted by a French anti-Semite
Yes,
who
I already mentioned this
like
before.
created like Aladdin and stuff. Yeah, and they're still great stories. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. But the actual 1001 Nights has such a cool diversity of people in it. Like Jafar is a good guy, and he's like friends with like a hunchback, a Muslim, a Zoroastrian, and a Jew, and they have to like pull off a heist. Like there's
That
all these
sounds
crazy
sick.
stories. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So I love those. I love 1001 Nights. Even it's not just for the Jewish stories. Although there is a really fucked up one about this Jewish farmer who's sitting there with his son, and his son is eating like a chestnut, and he throws the chestnut behind him, and it whacks this invisible spirit or demon in the head, who gets pissed off and then reveals himself and goes, "I'm for that I'm taking your life," to his child. And he's like, "Don't take my child's life, take mine." And then they end up like coming to an agreement where the guy has a year to get his life in order, but by the time they meet again, this other demon has changed his mind because he's seen how beautiful the guy's life is. But like, and I just, I'm sure that story was probably stolen from non-Jewish sources, but it ended up in the collection. I have a collection of stories by
It's like a wholesome Green Knight story.
That is the difference is that dude chooses to face the Green Knight.
Yeah.
He's trying to prove himself. This was like a farmer sitting there and his kids just tossing chestnuts or whatever.
There's a lot of old stories where it's like somebody just does something
Right.
kind of innocuous and gets
Yeah.
just absolutely bodied for it.
God. Russian and German stories are absolutely like that. They're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, now you have no thumbs,"
Yeah, that classic
they're
bit.
yeah. They're not. They're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, did you fall into the well? You're dead. End of story." Like, there's no point. The Jewish ones tend to have a little more humor, or at least the versions of them that I've heard. And anyhow, all over the place here. I don't remember what the question was.
Actually, I don't either. Actually, so it's all
It was like other stuff,
Right,
from
yeah.
the Jewish. Yeah. I will say I'm still influenced by it. I still insert it in different things. Like Cairn Second Edition has ostensibly some Jewish stuff in it. I think folks think it has more than it does. I tried to make it more general than because I poured all my Jewiness into I put Dybbuk and stuff into this module. So when I later wrote the setting for Cairn, which is called Vald, I thought, well, I still like certain aspects of Eastern European, like forest Jewish stuff, but I was trying to make it more general. So it's not really there, but in my actual games, it comes up. Like, I'll still insert stuff that I thought was cool from various sources. So
you've had actual
I'm sure
complaints
it'll
about
happen again.
that, about like,
I'm
or just
not complaints.
or
No,
just
people have
mentions about
said,
it.
"Oh, I think Cairn Second Edition has a Jewish setting." It has a setting that's made to work with whatever forest fantasy you're using. I would
Okay.
say it's a merger of Welsh, Irish, English, German, Eastern European general, plus Jewish,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe a little bit of Japanese forest fantasy. Just cool stuff that I read. Like, there's a Japanese, or actually no, that actually was a Chinese story. There's a Chinese story about a living tree that I loved, that I have based some stuff off of. So I feel like folktales are a rich and shared history, and if they inspire you and you understand as much as you can understand about them, and they're, treated with respect, I'm very open to people using my material. For example, like you can take the concept of a golem, which is that's the one you always see a golem, so I had to put a golem in. I actually didn't want to originally, but the story ended up calling for it. I thought it would be kind of cool to invert the story of the golem, who's normally a protector, to be the gateway for a great evil.
Yeah.
But I've seen newer, there's some cool anime that use the concept of a golem and take it to a different place than the original Golem of Prague story had. By the way, sick side note, there is, if you go to Prague, you can see supposedly where the golem is kept, that it's still kept in a room in a synagogue, and you're not allowed in there. It's like not open to the public. And there's this, I'm sure, apocryphal story about when the Nazis took Prague. They went to the synagogue, and one of the SS officers went in there, and then he came out and said, "Order it shut. No one ever go in there again," and then left. And that's one of the stories I came across, was the Nazis finding a golem and then freaking the fuck out.
Wow. I mean, that doesn't surprise me with the weird shit they're up to. I would have assumed that story was going to them with their, I forget what's the name of the, their sort of mythological occult group.
Yeah. Yeah, what is it? I know what you're talking about. It's like it doesn't, what is it? If I went to Wikipedia I could find it. It's this it's the movement behind Nazi occultism.
Yeah.
What is it called?
I'm gonna look it up
now.
I
really want to know what it is.
Thule Society?
No, so that's a kind of occult. No, it's a very Ariosophy. Ariosophy, yeah. It's Ariosophy. It's Ariosophy. I just Googled it, but yeah, and the Nazis were super into the occult.
Oh yeah, no, they were complete freaks for a lot of that stuff. It's funny that's also in Prague. I mean, isn't Prague also the city that has like that bone church? That's just like all bones, or
oops,
it's yeah. There's a few cool places. I mean, it makes sense. Prague is old as hell.
It is, and I mean, even the Jewish quarter there, it's not like there's a lot of Jews there. So I mean, there are, but it's not. They all had to leave. You'll find that's true in Poland too. Poland is so Catholic, but at one point had more Jews than anywhere else because they were briefly welcoming to them. It didn't go well for them later when the Nazis invaded. But,
that seems to happen a lot in history, where because I was looking through, like I mentioned earlier, there was, because I was looking at like the Jews in Spain, where I was like, I didn't know about how long they had like sort of this like.
Dude. Yeah.
Second, I knew about what comes later, but I didn't realize the whole like under like the second. There was a term for this, a second class kind of. There's special class citizen that the Jews were called. I can't remember.
Well, conversos. There was conversos, there were Jews who converted for the face of it and pretended to be non-Jews. Otherwise, they would. So okay, for folks who don't know, the same day that Christopher Columbus left Spain to try to find the Americas. Was also the last day that Jews had to either convert or leave, and those who didn't leave would be executed. And this is a story that my father would always tell me, and I kind of like said, yeah, whatever. But no, it's actually true.
Yeah.
Also, now they believe that theoretically Columbus actually was Jewish and was one of these conversos. That is he's an Italian, but who had Sephardic Jewish parents from Spain. That is the current DNA evidence. That is,
really?
As of last year.
I didn't know that.
That the theory is, and of course people say, well, there's all these public letters where he's writing about Christianity and stuff, and like, yeah, that's what he would have to do.
Yeah, that's not.
But it's I don't know. I don't know that we want Columbus, but I'm just saying.
Yeah,
it is possible.
No, he's yours now. You guys can take him.
Queen of Spain ordered all Jews forcibly converted or killed. Many of those Jews fled and later landed in places that are now Germany and Poland, and developed extremely insular communities, including those that helped propel the language of Yiddish into popular usage, which became the dominant language of Jews in Europe for a very long time.
Yeah.
But yes, the Jews were in Spain. In fact, the Kabbalah was written by a Jew of Spanish Arabic descent, and you get, or not Kabbalah, they should say, the foundational Kabbalistic texts were largely Arabic and Spanish Jews who wrote in multiple languages. There was a huge movement to push Jews out of the Spanish-speaking places, and that's why you get yet another diaspora. I actually have a book here called History of the Jews in Spain, and it's actually really fascinating. I mean, it's most of them came through, the Middle East. They didn't come there from other parts of Europe. They came from the Middle East, and they brought with them Arabic and algebra and mystical philosophy, and they were just really cool and don't really get talked about that much. So
yeah.
Anyhow.
Yeah, no, I found the term I was looking for, because this was the area you're talking about in Spain. I do know about, but this was apparently from 711 to 1492. Under Muslim rules, Jews are labeled as dhimmi, a term which literally means protected people. Now, I think I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but I do think a lot of times, I think the view from a modern standpoint is that that's a lot better than it actually is. It's still limited. Like a lot of things, we're still talking about, hundreds of years ago, where it's nicer in some ways, but there's still all the limits that you usually have, where it's, still
right. So to be clear, so you're referring under the Muslim rule.
Under the Muslim rule, not the Christian rule.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
So within the Quran, Jews and Christians are considered people of the book, and dhimmi means that the law protects them, that they must be treated as full citizens even though they don't follow the same faith. It's why there are all these great stories about Jews and Muslims actually getting along pretty freaking well in history, because they had this sort of mutual respect for one another. In Islam considers itself the kind of last book of the trilogy, had Jews.
Yeah.
And Jesus is the most quoted prophet in the Quran. So, I didn't realize you were talking about the.
No. I wasn't very specific on, because I mean, there's a lot of Jewish history in Spain, and Spain's history between how much they move between Christian and Muslim for a lot of years is also pretty complex. So it changes hands quite a bit in different parts of it. It's funny you mentioned that about the Jews and the Muslims, because for part of my childhood, I grew up in China, and I went to a private school where my friend group looked like one of those like diversity brochures for like a university. Like I had an Azerbaijani Jew friend, I had a Muslim friend from Indonesia, Malaysia, a Korean friend, a Hungarian friend, Angolan. Like it was literally across the board, and we'd often discuss, even as kids, we'd discuss like religion and everything. It was just very interesting. The different sort of viewpoints at that time,
right?
Especially between the Jewish and Muslim friends of mine.
That is really funny. I assume you all spoke to each other in English?
Yes, yeah. We spoke in English. Yeah. We all knew Mandarin to differing extents, but
of course, yeah. That's great. Yeah, I mean, so the specific period that I was kind of looking at with Spain is like the Nachmanides, the Rambam period, which is like there basically when Kabbalah was like really at its peak of mystical but also kind of scientific sort of bullshit, but not like there's this beautiful mysticism that came out of the merger of these cultures, in my opinion. So when you had Jewish, Spanish, Arabic, Muslim cultures all mixing together, I think you do get a completely unique take on our culture and religion. Now, I'm not an expert in this, but like I've learned to appreciate it in a way I never did before, and in some ways it's quite beautiful. Like there's some, if I was a religious person, I can understand why it would be so powerful, but they're literally like some of the stuff in the module comes directly from Kabbalistic writings that folks like Rambam, the Kabbalistic writer, created. They wrote these philosophical treatises that said, if you unite the female and male spirit and meditate in this specific way, you will become one with God briefly. You know, they had this very mystical and open belief system that I don't fully understand. And like folks like the Chabad, which are like a modern Orthodox movement, that they like are really into it. Like I didn't realize how truly they believed in this stuff, but like, man, these people were I mean, today, like there are people today who I always wrote off as like religious lunatics who have a truly pure look at monotheism that I never appreciated before. So one nice thing about researching this module was learning to respect. I mean, I always respected the religious. You really can't be Israeli and not like have dealt with it. But it's not like in the US where there's this huge divide and secular folks are just like, what, those crazy people? It's more like, it's how we see the Amish in the US. You know, there's this kind of funny respect for them folks have without ever really interacting with them. That's kind of what I've gained from this that I didn't have before. Now, that said, my friend Yossi has no problem texting me hilarious bullshit that they do on a daily basis. Like, you know, this guy wrote in complaining about an advertisement that had women's shoes, you know, stuff like that. But then I also learned like, hey, some of this is actually kind of beautiful. And so that was a gift, I think.
Yeah, no, that absolutely. It's a weird thing for me because like I'm an atheist, so for a lot of it, it's
me too.
I would say I'm a reformed Reddit atheist, or like I'm not the annoying 14-year-old I once was about it. I've kind of just learned to be like, you know what, I need to chill the fuck out. But that's like, yeah. But I won't keep you here too much longer, Yochai. But I have a question. So of the mythological creatures that you did put into this text, which one do you think is like one of the most underrated in like the general zeitgeist that you'd like to see sort of more people use or
right, like sure, yeah, I would love to say Golem because it would be fun to undermine that, but I just didn't find it that interesting.
Yeah.
In terms of what people actually use, the Dybbuk sometimes shows up in popular texts. For those who don't know, that's basically a spirit that has attached itself to a living person and it's always negative. I really like the idea of a Dybbuk as portrayed in some other stuff I wrote. They're basically monsters. Like they like create like knives for hands and mutilate family. Like they are monsters, which that actually isn't usually how it's perceived. It's usually seen as this weight on your back, which is fine. I like that too. But the reason I liked it is because then it lets me use the Yibul, which is a kind of the opposite. It's a spirit that's like, I am going to stick around because I have some promises I made and I need to see them through. It's not like an evil spirit. If anything, it's there to help out, you know?
Yeah.
Let's say you have like a sibling who died and you had originally asked them to promise you something. They stick around to help achieve that promise, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah, that aspect in Beyond the Pale was really, really sweet. The Dybbuk, did you ever play Resident Evil 2? I kind of play the Dybbuk a bit like Mr. X, if you know who that is, where basically he's this character that you can't kill, but he comes around every once in a while to basically like chase.
Yeah, is he in a suit?
Yeah, he's a suit. He's got a big hat, giant guy. Yeah.
I mean, I was like 14
Yeah.
last time I played that game, but wow. Yeah, like sort of an immortal nuisance. Yeah, that
they
makes
eventually
sense.
had to deal with him, but for a while just to
Right.
sort of get the
Right.
tensions going where he'd show up because
Yeah.
he could come through the puddles and that sort of stuff. So
Yes,
he was
well,
good
that's
for
the
that.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the idea. He's waiting for the right time, anyways. One thing that you probably didn't pick up on is the three rabbits that are on the cover, and they're also part of a puzzle. There are these three hares. They have three ears.
Just for our
It's on the
viewers.
cover of. It's on the cover. The story behind that is it was found in synagogues all over Europe, and there's really no explanation for it.
Were they also like in England as well? Weren't they like
They
they're
show
like
up
all
in
across?
England. They show up in China. They show up places along the Silk Road. We don't really know. I just thought that's hilarious, and
Yeah.
I like that it's this. I mean, so I've heard multiple theories about how there's like some biblical quote about God carrying the Jewish people as our hair is carried by an eagle or some shit like that. I don't know. I just like that it has three ears, but it looks like each rabbit has two. It's an optical illusion. That is from a German riddle that I also enjoyed. I'm not going to force everyone to listen to it here, but the riddle involves showing something that isn't what it creating something that isn't what it appears to be. So when you look at it, it looks like each rabbit has two ears, but actually there's only three ears total for
Yeah.
three rabbits. So that's not like explicitly Jewish, but was found all over synagogues, and I just thought was really cool. So
It's the original
it
MC
also
Escher
was,
painting.
it is like it is like an optical illusion. That we also made patches out of it for the first
Yeah, I have one on
Kickstarter backers. I don't know of any other things that I mean. I like some of the relics, some of the magic items a lot. Like I like the ink mirror. You know, you can pour a little puddle of ink into your hand, and then it lets you eavesdrop on like conversations that are happening elsewhere. But then like later on for like a month, whenever you like walk into a room, shadows scatter. Like,
Yeah.
that came from a folktale, by the way. So did the well, actually, the soul candle, which is how you get rid of like Dybbuk and stuff, also came from a folktale. But one thing that I really liked was the recipes for creating the two potions. Kind of towards the end in I think they're in which module they're in. I can't remember now, or which dungeon. I can't remember which dungeon they're in. I think they're in the second dungeon. Anyways, there is these potions, or I should say magic items that came from potions that are from real spells that came from actual historical research that you can find online. That's just like, here is a spell for making people like you, and you need to get like the leavings of a pregnancy of a cat's pregnancy, and you need to get like other weird shit, put it together, and it'll create a dust, and that dust will tell you if something's poisoned. You know, I love old spells are so cool. Same thing with the there are these bowls in the module. There's two different bowls.
Mm-hmm.
Those are real things. Essentially, if you wanted to avoid demons infecting your house, like actual demons, like the Aluka, you would inscribe religious magical crap in the inside of these bowls, and then you'd put them in like your front garden, and demons wouldn't infect your house. And they found these. We found these actual bowls. So in like little remains of houses, they've survived. So I love that kind of stuff, man. I love ancient magical bullshit. It's my favorite.
No, that is super cool. And this is complete, or it's related, but we maybe think of this because you said that like the real spells that people had. Do you know about those like white girl Etsy spells that people buy, where like
No,
it's like, do you want to curse like an ex-lover, pay $50 for the spell on Etsy, and your ex-boyfriend will be cursed? I'm just thinking, has anybody done a module with that, like some sort of like cyborg module or something using those
That's
it's
really funny.
It's honestly, it sounds like a great business to be in, because it's just pure profit, I'm assuming, because I don't know if they send you scrolls or if they just say, yep, we'll do the spell now.
I mean, it is a great. I mean, is it really any different than like donating to, I don't know, Faith Healer or something? It's
yeah.
similar.
Well, for me, there's not much of a difference, but for some people,
no, because the church provides things for people beyond that. You know, I'm talking about faith healers who literally aren't healing you and taking your money, and they're knowing it. You know, that's different. Like a minister believes what they believe. They're not trying to get you. There's a difference.
Yeah.
And for those who are, I have friends who are religious, and the church has a huge impact on their lives, and from their perspective, and I'm guessing from their minister's perspective, they're all doing their best. But a faith healer is like a very bad person taking advantage of people. Shouldn't be taken advantage of. So that's what I mean. White girl Etsy is very similar.
But yeah, on that note, I think I won't keep you here any longer, Yochai. I really appreciate you coming by and chatting, though, because this was great. I really enjoyed learning a lot about the Jewish mythology. I think we talked more about Jewish mythology than we did the actual, I think, adventure itself, but I thought that was very interesting.
Well, we don't want to give it away. Yeah, no, there is. Just for folks who want to know, there's a town, and there's kind of a factional war going on in the town. There's also a bunch of modernization happening, and you have been hired to either investigate what's going on in the town, or find a specific powerful object, or um, do two other hooks that I'm not going to go into. And no matter what your reason is for coming there, there is a timeline that if you don't solve certain things from happening, whether you know it or not, there will be an apocalyptic event at the end of the time, unless things change. And that doesn't mean like you're the heroes and like the world is shaping itself. No. The world is doing its thing. You can try to affect it, and you might, but shit's going on, and you could theoretically play around in this setting and not even scratch the surface of the apocalyptic timeline, and then it'll just happen, and you'll all be very surprised.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not like the whole world is getting destroyed, but it is a large region. So that is the timeline, and folks can choose their own destiny. And I curious actually.
Yeah.
Did they prevent the end?
Did. They did. They absolutely when the event ending thing showed up the way it does, sort of like very prominently without knowing what it is, they were all like, "What the fuck is that? Something's going on." Like they knew right away, like we need to do something, and then they dealt with that final thing honestly pretty handily. They were very smart, but they went around and got the tools they needed to deal with the final thing.
Yeah. So I think it's important for people to know that there's two dungeons. One is more of a traditional OSRE dungeon. It was designed around a real temple that I've been to called the Temple of Banyas, Temple of Pan, in northern Israel. It's the last place Jesus ever spoke, apparently. Did a sermon anyways. But it's still in Israel. So I based the layout on that place. It's not supposed to be like, oh, look at all these Jaquays de loops and stuff. No, it's supposed to be purely historical for a specific reason. The other temple is also a non-traditional dungeon. It's based around the Sephirot, which is this very, I think most people recognize it. They looked it up. It's these emanations, they call them. It's these circles arranged in a very specific pattern that represent achieving a certain godhead. And again, it's not designed like a normal OSR dungeon, but there are a lot of OSR challenges inside of it. And encounters, and it is not in my mind like the quintessential OSR experience, but it is.
It's a fucking solid experience.
I mean, it's designed to create a certain experience. So if you want a more traditional dungeon, there are others, but that's not what this is.
No.
Anyhow, yeah.
But is there anything that you want to plug at all, Yochai? No, nothing.
Oh yeah. For folks who are looking for reasons I can't understand, hear my voice even more. I do co-host a podcast with Brad Kerr, who is an adventure designer. I'm more of a systems guy, although obviously I have written adventures. We call it Between Two Cairns. It has nothing to do with the game Cairn. It has to do with OSR modules. It's just a funny name, and we often have our Skullboy Sam Melly, who's an artist, on the show. So it's usually a systems guy, an adventure guy, and an artist just chatting up about modules every week, sometimes with guests, and it's free to download, and there's no ads. We do have a Patreon for folks who want to listen to us talk even more. Also, I make a game called Cairn, and you can find more about it at cairnrpg.com. It's free and Creative Commons license, and the books are all available print on demand at cost, although you can wait a month, and the Warden's Guide, which is my DM manual for Cairn, will be available also at cost as soon as backers get all their copies, which hopefully will be before June. We're still pumping out hundreds a day, but it takes a while.
I'm still waiting on mine, but I'm in the middle of the Atlantic, so I'm used to things taking a while here. Yeah. I usually check with my American friends, like, hey, did you get yours yet? Because I'm usually like 3 to 4 weeks behind any of my American friends getting their stuff.
Wow. So that they're all shipping from Florida in the US, or from London or in the UK, or from Portugal in EU, and it seems like the EU people got their stuff right away.
Yeah, I saw the EU people getting their stuff, and I was like, you fuckers. Actually, I think my friend from New Zealand might have gotten his as well, actually. And
those I think are coming out of the EU as well for some reason. It's how it is. I will say the bulk of the orders were from the US, so there's just a lot to go through. Everyone will get them. I mean, so far everything's worked great. Our goal was March, and we made it to March, but it just takes a long time. But they're working hard. I got messages. I get messages almost every day from folks being like, "I got mine," so
Yeah.
that's really nice. I'm still waiting for like people to do like videos and reviews. There really haven't been a lot.
I'm waiting to get the box before I do it because I also want to see if I can try and run with that stuff. Yeah.
Of course. No, I think that's part of it. I do know that Weird Science is doing a feature on it, which is cool. They're just a magazine. But yeah, I'm just excited because it's a thing I worked a long time on and want people to have it and use it. And I know if anyone is like me, they won't read the thing till it shows up. So that's why I'm like, come on, I've got.
How many adventures are in the box? Not to keep you
there is an anthology with 3 adventures, and then there's another one there's one that I wrote, which is called Trouble in Twin Lakes, which is the first in the official Cairn Adventure series. There's actually 2. You can get the second one, Rise of the Blood Olms, also free and at cost wherever fine RPG modules are sold. But special for the Kickstarter backers is this anthology of adventures written by Brad Kerr, Amanda P., and Zedek Shu. I actually ran the one that Brad wrote, and that just really cool to see like it in its final form with like the cover painted on. I edited the one that Amanda wrote, which is really great, and then Zedek's is, as always, just completely out there and unlike anything else I've ever seen. It's super cool. If folks who aren't familiar with him, he wrote the 1,000 Islands series and
my favorite
Reach of the
series.
Roach God. Yeah, mine too. He's the best there is, and like. He's a player in my game, so it's kind of weird to be like, I just know him as a guy now, but like everything he writes is like solid gold,
Well, because I think over the years I lived in China, I spent about, I would say, a total of like 4 or 5 months, I think, in Southeast Asia, and there has been no piece of media that sort of captured that for me than Thousand Islands. So like I have like it gives me a weird nostalgia, which is straight because it's not my own culture, but growing up with as a
memories.
kid, it's like how like how turkey dinner is also comfort food for me, but also so is most traditional Chinese food. Like because I lived in Shanghai and Beijing, so all the stuff you get there.
No, it's like I grew up eating mostly Middle Eastern food, but we lived in parts of California that were mostly Mexican.
Yeah.
And, the version of Mexican food you'd find in mainly Mexican areas of California. To me, Mexican food is comforting.
Yeah, exactly. It's just how you grew up with that. Even if it's not your own, it's just what you're used to from your childhood.
I mean, it's really good.
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah. And I'm usually a nostalgia hater, but for this alone, for my own thing where it's a nostalgia for a thing that doesn't really exist, I guess, I'm down with that.
Well, that's what we're talking about the old school. That's what
yeah, there we go, yeah. All right, we'll go down another rabbit hole, but thank you so much for coming on, Yochai. I really appreciate it. This was really fun, and I really enjoyed this.
Happy to be here. Thanks. Keep doing your show. I've enjoyed it so far.
Thank you.